Right. Back in October, we drew 1-1 at home against Rotherham, and it's fair to say that was a frustrating afternoon all round. This weekend, it's the return fixture. Glenn, if you cast your mind back, that game, I think, was 3 into the unbeaten run at the time. Although, obviously, we didn't know that. With the benefit of hindsight, you look back and go, okay. At the time, there was quite a bit of anger after that game, wasn't there? That was a really frustrating afternoon.
Yeah, I think people weren't fully bought into the Russell Martin sort of like way of football. There was quite a lot of dissent in the stands, and it was one of those games where, from what I remember, we played brilliantly for the first 20 minutes and pulled them all over the place and scored. And then we had 20 minutes of walking football where we just didn't do anything and just passed the ball around. And we had 99% possession probably, but just passed the ball around. And then we made a mistake at the back where I think Harwood Bellis didn't get enough distance on a header, and Bazunu, for reasons unknown, was 20 yards out, and they had, it was Jordan Hugo had one shot.
It was that lob, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it lobbed, and it was literally the only time that Rotherham really got into a half. It was ridiculous, and it's a game that I think has haunted Russell Martin ever since. Because he's still bringing it up like 2 months later. He was, and because I think it was everything against, his whole ethos, which is, he wants us to dominate possession, so we win games deservedly. That's his whole thing, and I think that really offended him that Rotherham managed to nick a point having had one shot. However, at the time, as I say, not everyone had sort of like bought into Russell's way of doing things, and so there was a lot of frustration that we had basically passed the ball around without going anywhere, then let in a goal, and then we went into panic mode when it went 1-1. And when you're trying to force it too much, it never really happens. So it was a frustrating day, and it was at a time when we were dropping quite a few points at home. We hadn't. I mean, since then, have we won every home game since then?
Yep. Yeah, we must have.
I think we have. Yeah. So, but again, it's like the 4-game losing run. It serves a purpose in that it teaches you things, and since then, that's one of the things that I've been impressed with Russell Martin, is that he's shown an ability to learn from the bad times, and it's not just the 4 games. I think that Rotherham game where we basically chucked 2 points in the bin taught him a lot, and now we are much more likely to keep the foot on the throat and go for the second goal, especially at home. And the Swansea game last week was the first time we'd kind of done it away from home, and that's why this game coming up, even though Rotherham have had some success against some of the better teams in the division, I assume by parking the bus and then offering a sporadic threat like they did at St Mary's, I'm sort of like quite confident that we'll have the tools to deal with that this time. And if we get the first goal, which we tend to do, we will try and push home that advantage and not just sit back on it and go passive. So quite looking forward to this one. At the end of the day, even though they've had good results against some of the good teams, they are flat last in the league. So we obviously should have too much for them, and that's what we should be focusing on, and not the fact that they got a good result against, was it Leeds? They got a decent result against.
I think they drew with Ipswich as well.
Yeah.
Eleanor, you were at the Swansea game, I think, weren't you? So another away game. We talked on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about needing to turn it on and score more than 1 goal away from home. You must have, first of all, been delighted with what you saw at Swansea, but if we can kind of replicate that and get a good start, then we're going to make up for that drawback in October.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I remember that game, we just didn't put away our chances. But I know since then we've definitely improved with that. We've been much more clinical, and definitely the Swansea game as well. Because when we did concede, which was just a bit of a mess, I think, was it Flynn Downs scored moments after that. So it was good to have a quick response. And just like some of the best football we've played, because we were just so like fluid and everyone knew where they were on the pitch and everyone just seemed like so confident in like the way we were playing. So I think the game against Middlesbrough Rotherham I remember, because they drew 1-1. I think they were quite like resilient. So I think basically we just have to put away our chances, really, like, because I think Middlesbrough had a lot of chances and then just Rotherham were just good at like sort of keeping them out. So I think as long as we don't do what we did last time, because I was also listening to Russell Martin's interview on, I think it was Monday Night Club or something last week on 5 Live. And like I remember him saying like he was so frustrated with all the points we've dropped, and that we just needed to obviously like convert more draws into wins. And I think definitely like we can't really afford to, especially being 1 point off Ipswich, can't really afford to like draw against the side that are bottom of the table. So
I think Glen touched on it though, Steve. I mean, they've put some decent draws against teams that you necessarily wouldn't expect them to. You'd expect Leeds and Ipswich to get a win there, and us to a certain extent. But for them, I don't think draws are enough, are they? They're in a bit more trouble now than they were back in October, and they've changed the manager too.
Yeah, I mean they're a little bit adrift now. I think 10 points off QPR now. So yeah, there's a sizable gap, and you struggle to see where a side with the resources that Rotherham have got, or don't have, more appropriately, to be able to close that gap. I mean, I think you can easily imagine that any one of QPR, Stoke, maybe. I can't even think who else is kind of just hovering. Huddersfield, probably one of those. You can kind of see any of those teams kind of going on a run of picking up like no wins in 10 or whatever. But you can't see Rotherham on the flip side winning the 3 or 4 games in a month that's going to close the gap to anything meaningful. So yeah, I think they're in kind of almost in damage limitation mode at the moment. You think, but they're quite happy to bloody some noses. And as you say, they've drawn at home with Leeds, drawn at home with Ipswich. Leicester needed a 93rd minute winner there. They've beaten Middlesbrough at home. They've drawn away with Middlesbrough and obviously drawn away at St Mary's. So against the better sides, they basically collected most of their points. So it's not going to be a walk in the park, or at least in theory, it's not going to be a walk in the park. But if we go there and we start the game in the way that we started against Swansea, albeit Rotherham clearly aren't going to play as open as Swansea did, then we should be able to blow them away. But it's easy sitting here saying it 6 days before. The proof of the pudding is going up there, and I mean, Yorkshire weather, likely to be cold, could be raining, could be windy. All of a sudden, the conditions kind of make the game a little bit of a leveler, and you never quite know how it's going to pan out. But you'd like to think now that we're now in that zone of just knowing how to get it done, and that's going to be the big thing, I think.
I did say it would be frustrating if the unbeaten run came to an end at Liverpool, but it would be even worse in hindsight if it was against Rotherham away. I mean, that would really like stick in your throat. Glen, was this the one which led to that top secret fans forum afterwards, where they had all the PowerPoints out to explain the style of play, and there was that kind of call for patience? I seem to think it was. Did they say it wasn't as a result of that game? They planned to do it anyway, but it was around that sort of time, wasn't it, where there was that bit of a wobble and people weren't convinced about that.
Was it after Middlesbrough, maybe?
I can't remember if it was. No, the Rotherham game had happened because that was mentioned quite a lot in the presentation itself. So we'd already had the win against Leeds and the win away at Stoke with Stuart Armstrong's free kick, and then we played Rotherham and drawn that game, and there may have been another one after that.
Is it Preston? There was
maybe
when Bazunu scored, or
Bazunu's header nearly. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that the Rotherham game did make up quite a lot of Russell Martin's speech. I don't know if he intended it to, but it was obviously something that was playing on his mind. So he kind of started off explaining how we always try and find the spare man and stuff like that. All fairly sort of obvious stuff. And then he went off about how Rotherham had one shot, and and that was it. And it was obviously clearly bothering him. So, and it actually served a, a decent purpose to explain how, that won't happen. More often than not, that will not happen. And if we play the way we play and we do it well, then we won't lose drop points in games like that. So and since then, it's been proved to be right. Yeah, we've had a couple of draws where we've come away thinking that we should have won the game, but not really for the same reasons. Usually, it's been individual mistakes that have cost us a goal. That have, like Watford away in the league was we were going to see that one out 1-0, and then the sort of double mistake at the end cost us. So yeah, we haven't repeated the Rotherham mistake, and hopefully we won't do it this weekend. But I think it's definitely something that Russell used as an illustration point to at that fans forum meeting.
Do you think, Eleanor, any of the cup starters are in with a shout of playing? We're heading into that busy time of the year now. Do you think it would be ended up with the same team that started the Swansea game? There's nothing that's really stood out today, was there, that makes anybody a nailed on start for the weekend?
No, I know I probably should not play like as strong a team, I guess, theoretically, because obviously they're bottom of the league. But I think definitely the team that started against Swansea should play, because I still like get so worried when you play a team like that sort of need points. Because obviously I remember like last season for us, we seemed to be better at getting points off like Man United and can't remember now Arsenal, obviously, like that game, but then sort of getting points like around us. So I think probably just playing the strongest team, because I mean Charlie's kind of like not as kind of like doesn't take his chances sometimes. So I think just sticking with like the midfield that we stuck with, and then obviously Fraser and Adam Armstrong and Shay Adams, like I think it all just is fine really. Doesn't sort of need changing, yeah.
I'm going to ask you all for some score predictions, as we always finish the little preview pieces with. Steve, just same question for you, I guess, first as well. Nobody really stood out from the cup at the weekend. There's no one going to be knocking on his door on Monday saying, I need to start.
I mean, if they do, they're very optimistic. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought so. And I think actually that's probably part of the reason for the kind of disjointed performance. I think there is a recognition that now there is basically more or less a set in stone starting 11 when everyone's fit and available.
Yeah.
Which is good in that we've got a settled team and that everyone knows their jobs and it's working really well and we're getting loads of really good results. But you do obviously have the flip side that then the players that aren't in that team know that they're not getting in the team. Yeah. And I think there's probably a psychological sort of slight reduction in motivation and performance levels when they do get a chance in a game like this, where I mean, if you're making 9 changes, you're sending out a fairly strong signal that actually you're not really that bothered about this game, lads. So yeah, I think realistically the 11, yeah, as I say, barring fitness and suspension, or someone coming in at some game in the not too distant future and doing something out of the ordinary, yeah, we could basically name our 11 for next Saturday right now. I think, yeah, I think we're in that situation now where you're going to try and play that same 11 all the time. It's going to get difficult next month when we've got a load of midweek games, and obviously we've tended to make 4 or 5 changes for those games with limited kind of performance benefit from it. So yeah, we have to see what happens in those games, but I would imagine this one it will be full strength. If the game is done early doors, if we do manage to put it to bed quickly, then you can look at interchanging some of these players with a view to maybe naming a slightly stronger side in the Watford replay.
Yep.
That's kind of the carrot on offer for Russell Martin, is that you can actually do some rotation in these league games as well as the cup games, and it's relatively low risk. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, the one thing I'm slightly concerned about is that they've basically got the highest rated keeper in the league. Victor Johansson, like if you look at like who scored ratings, they tend to give like a rating out of 10 based on sort of Opta-stats and stuff. He's by far the best goalkeeper in the league. I mean, obviously it's because he's the busiest. But if you've got a goalkeeper of that standard, and we saw it at St Mary's, he was brilliant.
Yeah.
And if you've got a keeper that's that good, you can kind of almost doesn't matter what useless non-entities you've got in front of him. If he's saving everything, then all of a sudden everyone just gets frustrated and you start panicking, which is what we did in the home game. So that's my, to be honest, that's my only concern, I think.
I can feel he hit it too well coming on, Glenn, and that worries me a little bit with these good saves. Well, listen out for that in the commentary. Right, let's do score predictions. Eleanor, would you like to go first? Score prediction, please, for the Rotherham game.
I don't know. I'll say 2-0 because I'd probably be more optimistic, but I don't know why I feel a bit nervous for some stupid reason. So I'll just go for 2-0. Yeah.
Glenn.
3-0 win.
3-0 win.
Yeah,
and
no dramas. Get the job done.
Going 4? We got 2, 3, maybe 4.
Well, I actually got it right this week. I actually got one against Watford, so I might even be off the bottom.
I'm last now.
What is it they say about a monkey in a typewriter? Or no, the stop clock, isn't it? Even a stop clock
tells the right time twice a day. Yeah. I mean, I can't get it right 2 weeks in a row, surely. But yeah, why not? Let's go for something silly. 4-1.
4-1. Right. Okay. Nice one. If you're watching live, by the way, don't forget to put all your predictions into the comments as well.